Hey, what's up, guys? I'm just gonna get this. I'm getting this stream started. I'm getting this stream started. I just woke up, so my pronunciation of words might not be very good. I tried to do a couple articulation exercises so that I could speak clearly, but I'm a little tired. So, okay. So bear with me while I untangle my tongue, and give me a moment. Actually, I was trying to. I was actually, I don't know why it's so hard, but my YouTube chat module is not working. I'm trying to fix it right now. One sec. Okay, there we go. Should be able to fix it. Yeah, sorry. Just bear with me for like one more minute, cause problems. Okay, there we go. And the chat works. And everything on my stream is looking like it's working. Did somebody send a chat? No, right? Okay. Hey. Okay. I think we're good. I think we're good to go. I think we're good to start, except for me not being able to pronounce things. Here we go. So the March SAT is coming up in. If you're in Asia right now, the March SAT is coming up tomorrow morning. So you have like if you're in Korea, for example, you would already, if you're in Korea or most parts of China, does China only have one time zone? Am I remembering that correctly? But if you're in China or Korea, in some of the big cities in China or Korea, like you'd already be taking the SAT 24 hours from now. Right now I'm in Vietnam, so kids in Vietnam would be just at the center, just getting started 24 hours from now. So it's coming up real soon. If you're in the States, you do have another half day on top of that, so you have a little bit more leeway there. And the stream is really for kind of like last minute, not really a technique. I mean, it kind of is a technique, I guess. It's a technique, but it's something that you can implement without too much legwork. It's just a different approach from what you might already be doing, but not that different, okay? But it's a way to kind of get around some of the weaknesses of like, I'll say it this way. Everyone loves blaming their vocabulary, okay? And when people blame their vocabulary, it just means they want to blame that they don't know the word. Oh, I just don't know the definitions of these words. And they like to make themselves, whether they're intending to or not, they like to make themselves helpless, okay? And I'm trying to combat that feeling, because that feeling of helplessness is not going to help you, okay? Of being like, oh, but I don't know the word. It actually gives you this excuse. It allows you to get away with, yeah, but I didn't know that word. That excuse of vocabulary. Vocabulary is such a convenient excuse, and that's why everyone, that's why everyone likes to use it. Now, it's not a completely baseless excuse. It's a fact-based excuse. I mean, the fact is, you look at a word and you don't know what it is. You know, that is a truth. You know, it's not something you just made up. But I want to see like somewhere between that gap, somewhere in the gap between like just not knowing the word, okay, and and like not blaming your lack of vocabulary all the time, okay? What other thing could you actually be doing, and how can you approach the test tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, where you can at least get maybe out of 5 questions, maybe one more correct, okay? So that's the issue right now. What's up, Jay? All right, so vocabulary being what it is, what can you actually do? And here's what you guys are doing. The vast majority of you guys. When you see a word that you don't know, okay, you will look. And you will first, before you can decide that you don't know it, the first thing you'll do is you'll look at the letters, the spelling of the word. And a lot of you guys are really horrible at spelling, by the way, because of technology. That technology does all the spelling for you. So you actually don't really know the intricacies of like how letters are sequenced, because your iPhones, your iPads, whatever, they do all the spelling for you, right? So you look at the spelling of the word, but even compared to like people 10 years ago, you guys specifically will look at the spelling of the word, and you guys will just have a less familiar relationship with the spelling of words, okay? And so then you take this sort of like fuzzy look at this word, and the first thing you'll do is you'll try to see if you recognize the spelling of the word with something that you remember the definition of. And that's the number one thing you go for, okay? You go for definitions. Oh, this means blah, blah, okay? And then when you don't know the definition, you're basically 50% to the way to being done, okay? When you say, oh, I don't know the meaning, you're like 90% of you are already halfway done. Whereas if you actually compare yourself to people who are getting really high scores, they're probably, actually I didn't really pre-calculate this because I do have some steps that I want to talk about, but they're probably like 20% done, okay? Whereas you are 50% done. Now, what happens after you decide that you don't know the word? You do one last thing before you truly give up on the word, okay? You kind of listen to the sound of the word, okay? And you try to find other words that looked or sounded similar to that word. And this can sometimes, if you add like another mini step, you'll sometimes look for like prefixes, suffixes, and you'll and then you'll like let me give you an example, like a illicit versus illicit, okay? Those are two different words. There's one with an E and there's one with an ILL. EL versus ILL, okay? But if you if you either look at it or if you kind of hear it out in your inner ear, you'll kind of try to imagine how this one word by itself, okay, looks similar to some other word that you already know. And then you'll guess they probably mean the same thing, right? Or you'll guess the opposite. They probably mean opposite things, right? And then you'll base your entire guess on that feeling, okay? And then now 90% of you are done. But there is a remaining 10% of you that go further, okay? Because this is really woefully insufficient. This is not as far as you can go. So the thing is that when you don't know a word, okay, you really also want to, and this is shocking that you guys don't do this, but like literally like 9 out of 10 of you just won't do this. If you see a word like, I'm gonna come up with this, okay, I don't know why this is the first one, but if you see a word like conceive, CONCEIVE, okay, conceive. When you see that word, okay, you guys, for whatever reason, you guys don't think of, and I'm gonna say these next two words, pay attention, related forms. I'm gonna say that one more time. You don't think of related forms, okay? What are related forms? Conceive is a verb. What's the noun form of conceive? 3, 2, 1. Conception. Right? Conception. Let me try to give a different example that might be more productive. Okay, presumption. Presumption is a noun. You can tell by the tion. Presumption. PRESUMPTION. What's the verb form of it? Presume. Okay. What's the adjective form of it? Presumptuous. Now, these are things, these three words, you, out of everyone who's watching, I am maybe excluding, like, out of 5 of you guys who are watching, excluding maybe one of you, okay? Because maybe you're younger or you just have worse vocabulary than the rest. 4 out of 5 of you know all 3 of these words, okay? Presume, presumption, and presumptuous. You know all of these words. But the craziest thing is you don't really, when you see one of the related forms of the words, you don't think of the other related forms of the words. And when you don't think of the other related forms of the words, you forget that, like, I'll go a little bit further. You see the word presume in context of some sort of sentence, blah, 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 stop presuming, blah, 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 blah. And then if you can't remember that presumptuous is a pretty strongly negative word, right? Then you can't remember that, like, that the word presume might also have a negative connotation, right? So related words is for some, like, wild reason, because as a kid when I was your age, you know, this was something I was doing unconsciously all the time. You know, I was just like always. Every word I learned or every word I saw, if I had to, like, wrestle with it, I would always think of related forms. Like, no one taught me to do it. I just did it automatically. I was shocked when I became a tutor and I started realizing none of you, like, not none, very few of you guys are actually doing this, okay? So, like, that is the other step. So, first, you might look at definitions, okay? That's fine. Second, you might look at just, like, the look and shape of the word. That's dangerous. Okay? I'm recommending skipping that step. Instead, look at related forms. I try to identify related forms. What's the related form of allege? What are the related forms of allege? ALLEGE. Allege. What's the noun form of it? Allegations. Where have you heard? Okay, now this moves on. This moves me to my next next step. Actually, I'm kind of getting my orders mixed up, but it doesn't. The order really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So I'm going to just move on to whatever comes to mind. But there's related forms, and then there's obviously. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but there's obviously synonyms, which is very, very much next to definitions. You guys usually look at definitions, and then you guys try to think of synonyms. Definitions, synonyms. And the reason that's a little bit different is because oftentimes when you guys look at, when you guys are studying for, when you guys study vocabulary, you're studying definitions and synonyms, and you're doing it in like a, you're doing it in a way that's completely divorced from, like the rest of the sentence, okay? You're looking at that one word and you're just thinking about the other words that you've seen in your vocab lists. Let's see. I don't have those practice questions like ready, so if you give me something to work with, then go ahead. But right now I'm just gonna keep talking. So you're going to work with definition synonyms, and then you're looking at the look and shape of the word, and now I talked about related forms. You'll realize, though, that you can't think of synonyms all the time because you haven't studied vocab lists for every freaking word. Also, synonyms are things that you kind of study artificially, right? You have to like force yourself to study synonyms, and then you'll recognize, oh, I remember learning the word mitigate and mollify and soften and weaken in one grouping. I remember learning that grouping a long time ago. So that's a synonym. These are synonyms with each other, right? Mitigate, moderate, I should have added that, ameliorate, mollify, soothe, or whatever, assuage, right? You remember learning that grouping, and so you have those synonyms that you artificially studied. You didn't learn it through just reading. You learned it by actually sitting down and learning that one grouping. And now you have those synonyms as a bucket in your head. Now, some of you actually don't do this. Okay, some of you don't have any buckets, and literally all of these words in the English language are all just like separate relationships. It's like when you have. It's like some guys just don't have friend groups for whatever reason. They literally just have single friends, and they're just single chatting every single person because for whatever reason they don't have friend groups. It's like that. When you don't have synonyms, you don't have friend groups. And so every time you want to hang out with somebody, it's like one-on-one, okay? Which is not the position you want to be in, okay? You want to have groups. You want to be able to associate those groups. Actually, if you're not learning, whenever you learn a word, if you don't also learn the synonyms of the word, you're actually making a huge waste of time. And I just realized this is also a very common problem. A lot of you guys are really just learning definitions only from a big fat list, and you don't even learn the synonyms, which is huge. Obviously, after synonyms, you should also learn antonyms, but I'm not going to get too much on the learning aspect of it. That's not the focus of this. That's not the focus of this stream because you can't learn that much between now and tomorrow. But yeah, just needed to be that side comment. That's the difference between definitions and synonyms. Synonyms, you're learning the groupings of words. You're learning not the groupings, but you're learning groupings of words, and then when you're actually looking at the test, you're trying to recall those synonyms, okay? Recall the other friends in that group. You go to relate, but then if you can't remember the definition, you can't remember any of the synonyms, and then you try to do related forms. And by doing related forms, you can start breaking out. And then after related forms, what do? And this is sort of the crucial next step. If you go to a word like presumption, okay? If you go and see a word like presumption, and hang on. Let me try to think of a. I'm going to commit to presumption for now. If you guys hey guys, toss out any random words that you've seen recently from your tests that if you don't that you had some trouble with. Okay. What words on your recent tests have you had trouble with? Because it'll be faster for me to come up with actual examples if you guys give me some hard words. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna come back to that in a second, but yes, when you look at the you've tried the related forms now, okay? And then when you're still feeling stuck because just the related forms will not tell you how to use that word, okay? What else do you do with that word? How do you keep moving forward with this word that you're not sure of? Now, we're making the big leap. I guess there's one other step that probably won't apply to most of you, but that's the etymology step, okay? And that's the, like, I don't know. When you break the words down into like their word roots, but most of you will not be able to do this because you actually have to study a lot to prepare for this. So I'm going to skip that step, okay? That said, you really should learn prefixes and suffixes, but besides that, the actual middle part, the meat of the etymology, that part takes a long time to figure out. So I'm going to skip the etymology step. So then you go on after that, and then we make the big leap into usage. Okay, what is usage? When I tutor students, when I tutor students and I'm looking at their, and we're reviewing one of the questions together, okay, and then they get stuck on a word, I don't just tell them the word right away. I ask them, okay, how familiar are you with this word? From 0 to 10, how familiar are you with this word? Where 0 means you have literally never heard this word before. You look at this word, you look at the spelling of this word, it looks like an alien language to you, okay? 10 means you use this word all the time. You speak it all the time, you write it all the time. You're so familiar with it, if I asked you to make a sentence with it, you could do 5 sentences with it, okay? You could do 10 sentences with it, okay? That's 10. And then 5 is somewhere in the middle of like, I've heard it before. I know what it means. I don't know how to really use it. I don't really have any close relationship whatsoever with this word. I can't associate it with other words. I just kind of know what it means. All right, that's a 5. So how familiar are you with the word? And you should probably notice that the philosophy behind this question is pretty different from the philosophy in your own mind. The philosophy in most of your minds is basically, do you know the word or do you not know the word? That's it, right? But knowing or not knowing the word is literally just 5 on my scale, okay? The more important thing is not knowing the word, it's actually being able to use example sentences with it, and this is what usage is. So, when you see a word like repudiate is interesting because it is very specific. But when you see a word like repudiate, you actually, repudiation. Depends on what you've been reading these days, but if you tend to be in more argumentative, debatey circles, you'll hear you should be more familiar with the word repudiate. If you've done some like AP language repudiation, actually, I think if you know repudiate, you'll be equally familiar with repudiation. So I'm going to go to a different word. But if you do, for example, if you're just like an American school, you see the word presume, presumption, and presumptuous. Presumption would be the word you would probably be least familiar with, even though it's pretty easy to back form what the meaning is. Presume would be second least familiar, and presumptuous might be most familiar, but that's also kind of iffy. Let's try to think of a different, more representative example. Let's see. No one else gave me a vocab word here? Give me a sec. I need to come up with a different example, but my word examples are too hard right now. I'm trying to think of like a moderately buttress is funny because it's very specific. Because also buttress doesn't have other, it does have two forms. It has the noun form, buttress, and then the verb form, buttress. They look the same. And it always just means the one thing, except it has the architectural meaning, which is a separate thing. But buttress doesn't give us a lot of... oh, you know what? This one's interesting. Produce has a lot of forms, and it's interesting how many forms there are, okay? Produce, can you guys think of the other forms, the related forms of produce, okay? There's, like, if you get really creative, like if you're doing like Wordle and other games, you can also remember there's also noun produce, which is for like fruits and veggies. There's produce, which is to create. There's the other noun, product, which is the end result of something, of a production, right? Oh, there's the other noun, production. And then there's the adjective. Can you guys think of the adjective? Productive, right? So we have all these forms. Now, most of the times when you think of the word productive, if I asked you how familiar are you with the word productive, all of you should be at like 9 or 10, okay? Like productive. How familiar are you? 9 or 10. You use the word, you know how to use the word, not hard for you to use that word, yeah? But then when I talk about usage, what am I actually talking about? Well, you have to now stop thinking about the word in isolation, and you have to look at the word in context of the passage that you're reading. And what if it says, what if the passage says something like, the chemical X treatment was the most productive. Now, I'll have to add more context. The chemical X treatment on the tobacco plants was the most productive out of all of the treatments. The chemical X treatment on the tobacco plants was the most productive out of all the treatments. Okay? Again, I know that's a confusing sounding sentence, so I'm going to just say it one more time. I'm going to say it one more time, but with a different grammatical order to make it a little bit maybe simpler, hopefully. Out of all the treatments, chemical X was the most productive on the tobacco plants. Okay. Now, how familiar does that one sound? Okay. Earlier, when I said just productive in isolation, no usage whatsoever, just production in isolation, you should have said you were 9 or 10 familiar. You were 9 or 10 level familiar with the word productive. Now, when you hear the word out of all the treatments, chemical X was the most productive on the tobacco plants. Now it should actually sound less familiar. It's like, what the heck are we talking about, right? This is where the idea of usage really helps. The idea of usage, in combination with related forms in this case, the idea of usage really helps because now you can actually start breaking down what this means. Now, some of you guys are kind of like bio and chem kids, so you already know what this means, but some of you aren't. So I'm just going to work through this example. Productive is related to produce, yeah? And productive, the usage in this sentence, not in isolation, just in a dictionary, but the usage in this sentence is the chemical treatment X is productive, okay? So the subject is the chemical treatment X, and productive is just an adjective here, right? Now you're looking at what it's directly relating to, and at that moment, you can start thinking, you could take just those two out, and you can start thinking, what does it mean for a chemical treatment X to produce, right? And you separate that out, and like, if it does produce anything, what would be the object of that production? Subject, verb, object. treatment produces something else. Now, if you can't think of this at any moment, now if you can't think of a fake object at all, you should be able to think. Hang on. This produce is probably not the best example because it is kind of a little tricksy, but I don't want to rush this, so let me just take a breather real quick. It gets a little, I'm like trying to figure out the way out here. But first, just starting with produce and the object, the treatment should produce on the tobacco plants what? And I think out of like the, out of like, let's say if there's 5 of you, I would assume maybe like 2 or 3 of you can already guess this. A treatment on the tobacco plants should produce growth. Right? And that would be an easy idea to stick to. At that point, you can start making guesses on what productive means. Productive just means better for growth. Okay? And that's how you would use that. That's how you would like look at a word, okay? By not just try to remember the synonyms and definitions that you've learned in the past, but you're actually trying to look at it on the page and you're trying to figure out, based on the usage, okay, what other, like, what are the subjects, what is the subject, what is the verb, what is the object, like, what is this combination of things that can make, that works in this context, okay? So I'm gonna take a quick pause to talk about something that I think I've seen multiple times in the chat, which is, context clues. So context clues and positive, negative, and some other things. Yeah, I'm not really talking so much about that because those are actually more of reading skills. But yeah, like I know the way I'm dividing it in my head is a little unusual because I didn't really learn to read well through, Kaplan and Princeton review books. I learned to read well just by reading well, and then I went back and I reverse engineered what works. Like Kaplan, Princeton Review, 5 Steps to a 5, whatever, right? They're all gonna like they're gonna try to break it down to steps like identify tone, identify transitions, and that's not all bad. That's not bad, but the focus. I have never seen a chapter in any of those books where the focus is literally just look at the word. Okay? And in the next 12 seconds, when you're just stressed out about that word, what should you do for those 12 seconds just on the word itself? Okay? And that's the focus right now. Because, again, a lot of you missed the beginning of the stream, but what I was saying at the very beginning, okay, was most of you guys, a lot of you guys, unintentionally love using your unfamiliarity with this word as your excuse. Oh, I don't know what it means. Bruh, I don't know what it means. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what it means, right? And I'm saying, actually, there's a lot of other steps besides just meaning. There's other things to do besides meaning. And so if you're just quitting the moment you decide that you don't know what it means, then you're actually you're basically whining. Like, take some responsibility and actually go further with that word. See how far you can go with that word. The next obvious step after definitions is synonyms. The next less obvious step after that is etymology, and then the parts that I'm talking about is related forms, which is it's something that a lot of you guys don't do, even though you really, really should be doing. Okay, and related forms. I didn't even mention antonyms, but antonyms, and then now I'm talking about usage. Okay, and usage will be basically the predominant theme of this particular lecture here. So we had a bunch of. So that's why I'm not really talking about context clues and tone, because those are, honestly, they're covered in lots of books, and they're not really focusing on what to do with the word itself, okay? It's talking about what to do with the rest of the passage. Okay, so finally with usage. Finally, with usage. By the way, I know that a lot of this is very theoretical, but I'll come back to like a very actually, I'll drop the immediately practical thing afterwards, very soon. So when you're looking at a word, you have to, okay? Like, stop just being in your brain, just in the realm of your memory. You have to look at it in context. But when you start looking at it in context, you look at the word, the treatment is productive. The treatment produces, right? And you try to guess what it's trying to mean from within that context, but you still get stuck. Then at that point, you have to now fall back on your memory and you have to forget what's on the page. And this is the last step with usage. The last step with usage is come up with your own sentence for that word. Okay? So here you might be surprised that you'll look at a word like ubiquitous, which Yo Zappin, thank you earlier, shared. You might be looking at a word like ubiquitous, which actually out of if there's like 10 of you here, out of 10 of you, you guys are all fairly motivated kids because you're actually watching a YouTube video on this. So probably 7 out of 10 of you would know ubiquitous, okay? But let's just pretend we're one of the 3 people who don't know ubiquitous. So ubiquitous, by the way, if you don't know ubiquitous, it's not actually that common of a word in your day-to-day life, right? It's very uncommon, but it's just like one of those classic SAT words that everyone learns if they study for the SAT. And then once you start seeing it, once you know the word ubiquitous, then you start seeing it everywhere because it's ubiquitous. And just to define it for you guys, ubiquitous does mean commonplace. It's all over the place. For example, in America, the iPhone is ubiquitous. In America, the iPhone is ubiquitous because it's everywhere. Okay. Now, with that out of the way, you might be surprised, guys, that you will look at the word ubiquitous. Okay? And if you're like trying to break down the word ubiquitous from context clues and everything, you might actually get more confused. But if you actually cover the page and you just sort of look into the sky and you think, hang on, what's usage combination? Okay, so ubiquitous is just an adjective. So it's just what noun have I ever maybe heard the word ubiquitous with, right? What noun have I heard the ubiquitous with? And you just try to do like a word game with yourself really quickly. Ubiquitous, ubiquitous, ubiquitous. I would say out of 10 of you, about 3 of you will read enough articles. Okay, out of 10 of you, 3 of you will read enough articles that you'd be like, internet devices or handheld devices or phones or social media or that kind of word and ubiquitous, you actually would have heard before. Social media is ubiquitous. Smartphones are ubiquitous. You might specifically remember that combination. Okay? Congratulations. If you pulled that up out of memory, that is usage. You're remembering the usage of the word ubiquitous, even without remembering the definition of the word ubiquitous, and even without remembering the synonyms or the antonyms of the word ubiquitous, you are remembering the usage of the word ubiquitous. Okay? Let's try to find a verb somewhere. And yes, Grace, by the way, Grace is on it. Yes, you hear it all the time with technology, okay? Grace is absolutely correct that the word ubiquitous is everywhere in journalism, which is why I said the word articles. But do we have an interesting verb here anywhere? Buttress. Buttress is funny. And somebody said ambiguous just now. Ambiguous and ubiquitous, that's so funny. You might have missed that part, okay? Because at the earlier part of the stream, I was talking about like the way you guys look at the look and sound of the word, and you guys just get things mixed up, and that's really, really bad, okay? So I'll come back to that later because I already talked about it, but aggrandize. Ooh, aggrandize is interesting, but it is a little advanced. I feel like most of you are not gonna feel. Um, Aggrandize is fun, okay? So I want to save it. I want to use it later on, but it is a bit advanced right now. I want a sort of like a lower level word. So guys, toss out some words, but uh, try to find a verb. I'm trying to stay away from adjectives right now because I just used an adjective ubiquitous before. Exercise, reduce, extirpate, too hard, appeal, synthesize. Let me see. Ambivalence is classic, by the way. That's okay. Grace with the Grace with these. I'm right now out of all the chatters. Grace definitely has the highest familiarity with words. So we have synthesize. Synthesize is interesting. Beseech is fun. Let me think about synthesis. Synthesize. Let's just work with synthesize. It's relatively easy, but I'm going to work with that one. Okay. So again, let's just say for whatever reason, synthesize is a little too easy, but I'll just kind of run through it. If you look at the word synthesize on the page and you're getting overwhelmed by what it could mean on the page, again, the whole usage step is okay. The thing that I'm talking about right now is I want you to cover the page. I want you to kind of look up at the sky. I want you to be like, how have I heard this word being used, right? How would I use it in my own sentence? And in this case, it's a verb. So you have to think of like what subjects usually go in front and what objects usually go after, right? So something synthesizes something else, all right? Unless it's an intransitive verb, then it's just a subject, but whatever. We're not gonna get into technicals here. So try to think of what words go in front and in back of the word synthesize, and you'd be like, the student synthesizes the concepts. That might be familiar enough for you guys to like recall on your own. They're synthesizing the elements. The chemists are synthesizing the elements. Okay, that one should be pretty familiar for you guys because of your academic course load. The method synthesizes two other methods, or whatever. So those kinds of words should be roughly floating around in your head. And then once you have the various once you kind of do a quick brainstorm of the various usages, you can go back and look at the page, and suddenly you might see you might not be able to describe for me. If I tell you what's the definition of synthesize, you might not be able to describe for me the definition. You might not even be able to remember the synonyms of synthesize, because the synonyms of synthesize are not exactly the same as synthesize. Like combine is not the same as synthesize, right? But you'll look at the page again and you'll remember the various usages, and then you'll still be able to figure out how it works. Okay, so that's usage there. Beseech is funny. I feel like most of you are not going to remember. Like, I don't think you'll have actually beseech in your usage vocabulary, right? Like, but if you do try to do like look at the sky real quick and you try to think beseech, which words have I heard before or after beseech? You'll be like, I beseech you. Who thought of that? I beseech you. You've probably heard it as I beseech you. And then next, you might try to remember the context where you heard that before. I beseech you. Now, I have a word in my head. I'm just going to give you guys a couple seconds to like think of something. Like what does the word beseech ever get used with? All right, 3, 2, 1. I beseech you, help me with something, right? I beseech you, help me with something. So beseech is a specific archaic word. We don't use it anymore. So it's very, very specific. So you're not going to, it's much less likely you're going to see it on the SAT, although you will sometimes see it on like the literature passage. But that's the kind of thing that's how you would use usage on the word like beseech. Rudimentary, let's see. Rudimentary is an adjective, so I'm going to skip that one. I'm trying to find a more classic example right now, but bifurcate, extricate, amicable, gregarious, ameliorate, parse, parse, pierce, parse. Parse is interesting. Fabricate, parse is interesting. Again, think about, like, you might not know exactly what, actually, I'm gonna guess most of you don't really, unless you're programmers, you might not know what parse means. P-A-R-S-E, parse. Okay, I'm gonna guess out of most of you, you don't know what parse means. But, weirdly, you probably know the usage of parse. Not all of you, okay? If there's like 10 of you, I would imagine about 4 or 5 of you would know the usage of parse, even though you don't know what parse means. Is that true? Who knows what words go in front of and after parse? P-A-R-S-E. Anybody know like a subject or object for parse? I'll give you guys like 5 more seconds. Okay. So we have the CS kids. So parse would be for like, so what's the object, what's the subject and object? Now, I'm not a coder, so maybe like a compiler or something, I don't know. I don't really know the CS version of it, but like, you can parse a person, a reader can parse the grammar or parse a sentence or parse the meaning, right? But the words in the object position for the parse would be like sentence, grammar, meaning, because it means something like interpret. And you can back form the definition of interpret through the usage of it. Does that make sense? So you should be able to do that on your own. But apparently parse was actually too hard for most of you guys, so. Oh, recluse. Recluse. Recluse is an interesting one because it's a little bit specific, but I think most of you will be able to sympathize with this one. Recluse. The word recluse, I'm going to guess maybe 2 out of 10 of you know the word recluse. Yeah? 2 out of 10. And recluse is a noun, verb, or adjective. What do you guys think? I'll give you guys 3 seconds. Just think about it on your own. Noun, verb, or adjective. It's a noun. Okay? A recluse. You think of the word recluse, and very few of you, maybe 1 out of 10 of you will just know what the word, you'll know the word brown recluse because it's a type of spider, okay? And maybe 0.5 out of 10 of you will know the actual definition. I'm not gonna say it right now because I don't wanna spoil it. But here, let's use the steps that I've been talking about. First, let's try to imagine a related form. Can anybody think of, so you know what? Everyone is literally doing the step that I told you not to do. Although some of you, it's because you actually learned the definition of it, and so you're kind of using the back door. But a lot of you guys right now in the chat, you guys are using the step of just like, what does it sound like? Oh, recluse, seclude. Yeah, but then what about include, you know? What about exclude, recluse? What about all these other words that sound similar? So you got to be a little bit careful there. Now, I think everyone has learned the definition, and that's what's you have the fuzzy memory of your definition right there, helping you. So I want to stay away from definitions, though. Let's stay away from definitions. Let's stay away from the way it looks and sounds, okay? And let's try to work with related forms. Guys, I know somebody can come up with this. Tell me the adjective form. Recluse. Give me the adjective form. I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to wait until somebody says it. What is the adjective form of recluse? Don't look it up. Just use your brain. Okay? You can come up with it. There we go. Reclusive. Reclusive. Recluse for you guys on the familiarity scale from 0 to 10 should be somewhere like, I'm going to guess for most people it's somewhere like 3 or 1 or 2, like between 1 and 3, I mean. Okay, it's going to be pretty low on the familiarity scale. But reclusive should feel more like a 4 or 5. Or maybe even a 6 depending on you, okay? Reclusive should feel much more common and like you've actually heard it before than 1, 2, 3. like 1, 2, 3 level recluse. Tell me if I'm totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure most of you guys it's like that, right? You've heard the word reclusive a lot more. Well, now that you have that related form, if you see the word recluse in context, if you see the word recluse in context, now you can use that related form. Okay, and then if you've ever heard reclusive, you might have even learned the definition before, but you forgot the definition. But like you might have heard an example of like reclusive in adjectives. So what's the usage of it? Try to come up with a usage of it. So give me a noun that reclusive, you've heard the word reclusive be applied to. Something is reclusive. What was that thing that was reclusive? Can somebody give me, can you guys just share, what have you heard the word reclusive with? Author, oh, that's good. Author's good. That's more of a bookish person's answer, but yes, I think there's a more classic example of a recluse, but yes, that's a good one. The classic recluse author is Thoreau for Walden. Okay, so nobody else is reclusive animals. That's not an association that's not a usage association that I have, but that exists. There are reclusive animals. Cats. Certain cats or Panthera or whatever. That whole medium, large category of cats. Some of them are really reclusive, so that's true. Okay, so the one that I was actually waiting for is monk. The most common usage that you should if you think of a reclusive person, you might think of a monk right away. An author is also really, really good. But if you have the reclusive monk in your head, even if you don't remember the definition, you'll remember the usage of reclusive monk and be like, oh, maybe like separated or something like that. Maybe distant, because they're in their little monastery doing their little, prayers or their Buddhist mantras or whatever, right? They're like kind of separated, and then you'll get to the definition of recluse or reclusive as somebody who is a hermit, right? Who is isolated, and you can guess that through the usage. So this has been a pretty long lecture because I didn't make a list of examples before coming. I just sort of winged it. But let me just do a quick summary of everything I've said so far, okay? Stop giving yourself the excuse that you just don't know the word because you don't know the definition of the word. Not knowing the definition of the word is not the end of that word. Okay? First, you do want to start with definition. Then second, you want to avoid the trap of looking for similar looking words or similar sounding words. Okay? Similar looking words and similar sounding words is a trap. And you can only avoid that. You can only rely on similar looking, similar sounding words if you actually learn etymology, which none of you guys are doing actually. Maybe one or two of you. Actually, I do sense that there's a couple nerds in this chat, so maybe one or two of you are doing it, and I can give you some tips on how to study etymology better. But that's more of a long-term thing. Okay. So avoid the trap of just judging it based on what it looks or sounds like. Most of you guys are terrible at spelling. I said smelling. Spelling. So for you, what looks like one other word is like totally wrong. It's like because your spelling is awful. So don't rely on that. Okay, it's dangerous on Saturday. Instead, what should you do? First, move towards synonyms and antonyms. But synonym and antonyms is something you actually have to build up artificially by actually studying synonym groupings and antonym groupings. So if you didn't do that, you can only go so far. And then start going into related forms. Don't just quit on a word like recluse just because you've never seen recluse. Is a recluse, include, exclude, I don't know, and then just move. And that's not good enough, okay? Recluse, what's the related form? Reclusive, okay? Do related forms. After doing related forms, then look And if you're still stuck, then try looking at usage. So if it's a verb, look at the subject and the object. If it's an adjective, okay, look at the noun. If it's an adverb, then look at the verb or the other adjective or whatever, right? But try to look and find the other words or the other words around that word in the passage, and then test your familiarity with just those words. Now, if that's still very unfamiliar, then cover the passage, just look up into the sky and think, hang on, this one word, this is your last ditch, this is your Hail Mary here. Where have I ever seen this word before? Can I form it into a phrase or a sentence? And make your own sentence or at least a phrase with it. It's like a reclusive monk, a reclusive author. And then once you have that, then you can look back at the passage and make your last ditch effort there. By running through this entire process, now you've extended the process a couple more seconds. Okay, when I say a couple more seconds, you could probably make a judgment like, oh, I don't know the definition of this word. You can make that judgment in like 1 second, right? But actually going through all of this will take you maybe like 20 to 40 seconds, depending on how stubborn you are about it, okay? Going through all of this can take you a pretty long time. But that comparison is a false comparison. Because here's what you're actually doing, okay? I know that 20 or 40 seconds looks bad, but you're forgetting what you actually do. Let's say that you take the 1 second, you decide that this is not the right, that you don't know this word. What you actually do after that point is you start agonizing about words. So then you get stuck between B and D and B and D and B and D, and you just start sitting, like you're not actually doing anything, you're just rereading the words over and over, and you're just recycling negative emotions inside your little heart. But you're not actually doing anything with your brain. Like, it's just static. It's just your heart, you're just giving yourself heartburn. And that sometimes goes on for longer than 40 seconds. You know, B, plug it in, reread it, feel pain. D, plug it in, reread it, feel pain. You know, it's like pain, right? Like, stop doing that. Like, literally, if you just try to imagine the usage of it, then Saul has already told you that the usage is your last Hail Mary. It's your last kind of shot at it. You can close that loop now. Okay, that's the best that you could do. You looked at the word recluse. You could, if you tried to come up with reclusive, you tried to come up with a word, and then you couldn't go any further. Okay, that's the end. Now you're done. You don't have to go on this endless cycle between B and D anymore. You know, you just did the best you could. Now you have to make a guess. Okay, so you can close that loop. And you don't have to, you don't have to just like keep circling around these negative circulating these negative emotions. All right. I just thought of a really great word. I just thought of the word equate. Equate is one that actually came up in a class recently. That was a fun word. I am supposed to meet somebody now, so let me send a quick text to tell them I'm late, and then and I'll take a couple questions here. Okay. Let's see. A lot of words start with the A for agnostic or atheist or amoral or amorphous or did we already say atypical? You did say atypical. Yeah, so there's a lot like that. So just prefixes are not really, like, the thing is that prefixes are so common that like it's hard to memorize an entire list just from prefixes, but you can find them online, so go ahead and look them up. One more time, the whole point of this stream is to focus on what you can do with your existing vocabulary. It's not about how to expand your vocabulary, okay? You already have an existing vocabulary in your head. And right now, what kinds of vocabulary do you have in your head? You have a definition vocabulary in your head, okay? That definition vocabulary is shockingly small. You can only tell me the definition of a shockingly small number of words, okay? You also have a synonym vocabulary in your head. You can tell me the synonyms of words, and this one is larger than this one's actually noticeably larger than your definition vocabulary. Okay, so it's more useful, but some of you have a much larger synonym vocabulary than others because you look up synonyms when you're looking up words. Whereas 9 out of 10 of you actually never look up synonyms. You just look at the first line in Google. You'll just search, define, extirpate. You just look at the first line, the definition only, and then you're done, right? So 1 out of 10 of you will have a shockingly large synonym vocabulary compared to the rest of you because you actually try to make groupings. If you look up extirpate, right, you'll also look up raise and uproot and all these other words, and now you're actually developing a synonym vocabulary. Now you're not one of those guys that just has one-on-one messaging. You actually are in group chats with all of your vocab friends, right? So you will have a much better synonym vocabulary, a way better synonym vocabulary than all the other kids. So you have your synonym vocabulary. You also have your antonym vocabulary, which is very similar. But then every one of you, your usage vocabulary is super huge compared to your synonym vocabulary and to your definition vocabulary. You might not know the definition of a word, you might not know the synonym of a word, but you'll be surprised. Actually, you do know the usage of the word, okay? This happens a lot more frequently than you think. Comma questions, real quick. Comma questions, my one, it's a very simple question, and so I'm gonna give a very, very simple answer, okay? Because commas, there's a lot of rules around commas, right? There's a lot of rules. I can't summarize all of that in one breath, but here's the really basic thing I can say about commas. Guys, stop counting commas. Count independent clauses, all right? You're counting the wrong thing. Once you start with the independent clause, then you can reverse engineer how many commas there's supposed to be. But if you start by counting commas, you're literally doing the most artificial thing. You're not even reading the sentence. You're not even understanding the sentence, okay? It's gonna slow you down. It's gonna make everything worse. Don't take the commas and try to figure out the independent clause from the commas and the modifiers from the commas and the adverbs or whatever's from the commas, okay? Start with the independent clauses and then identify where the commas should be, and then start learning, and then start identifying what the other parts of the sentence are doing, the non-independent clauses of the sentence are doing. Oh, this is a modifier, it's an appositive, it's describing the person, or whatever. You could fill all that stuff in backwards, okay? And Grace is saying LOL, but seriously, yes, it's actually, it's people who grew up thinking they were bad at English, so they had to learn English through rules, and so they had to learn English through rules. You actually stunt them by teaching that English is about rules, and then they start with the rules first, and then they work backwards to the English, when it actually should be the other way around. You're not bad at English, just keep reading and trying to understand the meaning first, and then you can figure out the rules later, all right? So a lot of people are just like, oh, well, I don't want to make a comma mistake because my tutor keeps yelling at me every time I make a comma mistake, so they start counting commas, okay? Start with independent clauses. Complex and information-heavy passages is really high up now. But anyway, complex and information-heavy passages is not something that I can quickly just do a whole lecture on, but I'll just say there's a technique that I talk about every once in a while, but I don't have a specific video on this technique, so you're not going to be able to find it, but I'll just say real quick. The technique is threading, and it's identifying words that may not look the same, but identifying the threads that connect through the entire passage, and you'll be able to start simplifying the passage in your head. This is not something I can just explain in 1 minute, so For you, you know what? There is something that you could do that's a little bit easier, that's more intuitive. Identify transitions, okay? Whenever you're looking at a passage and it's overwhelming, identify transitions. The harder the passage is, the more transitions there are, okay? The harder the passage is, the more transitions there are. Identify the logical transitions. And when I say transitions, I'm not just talking about transition words. I'm just talking about, a transition can literally just be a period, okay? In some situations, a transition can arguably literally just be a comma, okay? It doesn't have to say nevertheless or therefore, okay? I just mean, logically, it transitions to the next part. Here is a counter argument, here's my refutation. Here is a premise, here is a conclusion. Here is a claim, here is an example. I just gave you 3 different transitions, okay? The transition to the refutation, the transition to the whatever I said, and then transition to the example, right? So those are transitions, identify transitions that'll simplify the passage for you a little bit. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so guys, that'll be it for me. Guys, I had a slow start because I literally just woke up for this stream. But anyway, hopefully by the end it was pretty clear what I was trying to say. So guys, if you have further questions, you can keep chatting with me involved. You can keep chatting in the Discord server. The link to the Discord server is in the description down here, wherever it says more, okay? So in the Discord server, I'm very active in the Discord server. I'm always chatting a little bit every day. Do not assume that I will, do not aim your questions directly at me though, okay? Because I'm one person, you guys are very, very many people. When you go into the Discord server, you have questions, aim your question to everybody. And if your question is not this super lazy, I'm sorry, but because I'm kind of busy, you know what I mean? I'm going to focus on questions where I can tell that some work has been put into it, okay? The work can be put into it solo. If you put a lot of effort into explaining your question, then, that means you put a lot of work into it. Alternatively, the work can be put into it collaboratively. You and someone else have been talking about it for a while, and then I'm noticing some flaws in the logic there, and so I can see the work and I can see where the errors are, and then I can jump in and start talking. So do not just aim your question directly at me if you join the Discord server. Just put some work into your questions, talk to each other, and when I feel like it, if I think it's interesting, if I think that that I can contribute in a way that's unique to me and not some other person can just say whatever I'm thinking for me because it's such a simple question, right? Then I will jump in, okay? But that said, I am very active in the Discord server, much more than on YouTube, because I know my YouTube channel has been a little bit dead. But I'm always there in Discord, so come join. And one last thing, if you are assuming that you're going to be taking the May SAT as well, I will have 2 programs ready for the May SAT. The first program is called Give Me Structure. And Give Me Structure is basically just having people to take the Bluebook tests with and to be able to review together with. This includes me. I will be doing a weekly review stream for the Give Me Structure members, where I will just I will basically review the Bluebook with you, and specifically not the entire Bluebook. I'm not going to review all the questions, but I'm going to review your performance and give you tips every week on how to improve your performance through a weekly live stream. Okay, the time for that weekly live stream is Tuesday night in the U.S. and Wednesday morning in Asia. So that is Give Me Structure, and then there's a second program that I'm about to launch, which is called Give Me Knowledge. Give Me Knowledge is again, if you're studying for the May SAT, Give Me Knowledge is a 4-week repeating program. It's based on the SAT Suite question bank, the SSQB. I took all of the SSQB questions that are not in the Bluebook. I separated them by question type and by difficulty level, and so I have a bunch of PDFs. Okay, and so you don't have to if you go into the SSQB, there's no way for you to filter out the Bluebook questions. So if you use the SSQB, you're going to spoil the Bluebook questions, right? Plus, it's not in, I mean, you can make your own PDFs from it, but it's kind of like a hassle. So I've already made all the PDFs for you, and I have a program for you. So every 4 weeks, you're going to go through the entire the entire SSQB by question type. And so every week, we're going to cover 2 or 3 reading question types and 1 writing question type. And 2 or 3 reading question types, I will do a 2-hour lecture every week for the reading question types, so that you can actually learn, like earlier I was talking about threading, you can actually learn specific techniques for different question techniques. That is give me knowledge, okay? I'm kind of like saying all this from memory, so let me know if I'm missing anything that you want to know. The price really depends, because the Google and YouTube, they charge, like, I set the US price, and then they and Google actually makes it cheaper for, or when I say cheaper, I mean like appropriate to the PPP, the purchasing power. Stupid iOS. Okay. Hey, what's up? They make it, they localize the prices. That's the term. They localize the prices for your region so that it's more appropriate for your price level. But for the US, it's $10 for Give Me Structure every month. And Give Me Knowledge is $30 per month. Okay, so you can sign up by hitting the join button in. If you've already subscribed, you should see a join button down here somewhere. So if you click on the join button, then you can see the list of features or whatever, and then you can sign up for the May SAT programs. Okay, so that's there for you if you need it. If you don't, good luck, and hopefully, I mean, I'm trying to give free content that's useful, so hopefully if that's good enough for you, then you guys kick ass on Saturday's SAT. All right, until next time, guys, keep on learning, keep on growing. Peace.